Hello and welcome everyone to the October monthly webinar provided to you by Perry Johnson Laboratory Accreditation. I want to thank you all for logging in and joining us today. My name is Michael Kramer and I'm presenting. I am the Calibration and Inspection Manager at PJLA, and today we're going to be discussing Section 8.9, which is management review. This is, of course, in regards to ISO IEC 17025, 2017. We're going to look at those requirements and utilization of the management review. This webinar is being recorded. It will be available on our website shortly after this presentation. You can follow the link there to webinars. You can listen to this one or a wide array of past webinars. Also, the individual slides for this webinar and those that we've done over the recent years are available to you. Just follow the webinar link on our website. This webinar is being recorded. As I stated, you all are muted. Hopefully everybody can hear me. I cannot hear you. You do have a box on your tab for questions. If you have any questions, please keep them in regards to today's topic. And at the conclusion of the webinar, I can go back and review them and hopefully answer them for y'all. So as I stated, this webinar is in regards to Section 8.9 of the standard, which is management review. So management review. So what is a management review? It can be described as a meeting scheduled at planned intervals to discuss the core elements of your quality management system. So, ideally, you have a positive state of mind when you go in there, and it's being done with more zest than just putting something together to comply with this element of the standard. And hopefully you can use it as a vehicle for opportunities for improvement. So during the management review, laboratory's top management shall discuss the effectiveness of the laboratory's management system, testing and or calibration activities, and any changes that may be needed. Usually, your management reviews are timed to follow closely after each internal audit, so that the results of the audit may be discussed during the management review. And you'll see here as we're going through the requirements, the internal audit is one of the required inputs for your management review. So why is it important to perform management reviews other than the fact, of course, that the standard requires it? If performed effectively, the management review provides assurance to the stakeholders, which would include the accrediting body, that continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness of the laboratory management system, along with its stated policies and objectives, are focused upon and determine if the laboratory is operating effectively. If shortcomings are identified, the provisions can be made to ensure that the necessary changes are made or that the required resources are obtained. So again, the purpose of the management review is for top management and personnel that are involved in the decision-making process to systematically evaluate the overall performance of the laboratory and the quality management system. So, of course, I referenced another clause here, 823. You can see the requirements in there under management systems. Laboratory management shall provide evidence of commitment to the development and implementation of the management system and to continually improve the effectiveness. So, of course, top management's involvement, just not attendance, but actually involvement in the management review could strengthen compliance to clause 823. So again, who should attend? This states the laboratory management. So that can vary depending on the size of the lab, size of your organization, and number of participants. In bigger organizations, perhaps a special meeting can be organized in the management circle. Smaller companies, the entire staff may be involved. I have seen that on several occasions. Like to see involvement in the management review. The minimum, however, should be who would be deemed a technical or quality manager in regards to the 17025 accredited structure of the lab. And under section 5.2, whoever fulfills this role, the laboratory shall identify management that has overall responsibility for the lab. That's under structural requirements. This person, whoever identified, should be involved in the management review. So in preparation for the management review, to ensure all the required inputs and outputs are captured, recommend an agenda containing those required elements can be prepared. As you'll see, we'll go through the requirements. A lot of shalls there on things that the management review should incorporate. Recommend that an agenda be created. Therefore, all the required inputs and outputs would be captured during the management review. However, you can always do more. So if there's other items that you would like to bring to the forefront during the management review, by all means, those inputs and outputs are the minimal requirements. So looking at the requirements here, very first clause, 891, the laboratory management shall review its management system at planned intervals in order to ensure its continuing suitability, adequacy, and effectiveness, including the stated policies and objectives related to the fulfillment of this document. This document, of course, being the 17025 standard. So we have a couple items in there that I've defined here. Talking about the ensuring continuing suitability can be looked at, or the current processes and operations included to enable and support the activities of the lab. Adequacy, evaluate if all the mandatory 17025 contractual, organizational, and regulatory requirements are met. Effectiveness, evaluate to the extent to which the management system is capable of accomplishing the purpose of producing the intended or expected results. We also state plan intervals. So states that plan intervals. So somewhere within your quality management system, this plan interval needs to be specified. Ideally at least once a year. Whatever works best for your organization. It can be broken down into smaller segments, or perhaps one all-encompassing management review works best for your organization. But somewhere in your quality management system, I can tell you as an assessor, that is something that I would look for from an organization when I get ready to evaluate or assess the management review. That plan interval and determine whether or not the actual management review fell within those guidelines there set by the plan interval, which would be documented in the quality management system. All right, now we're going to get into the requirements. Whoops. Sorry about that. So we have shall. Listen to me before. You probably heard me say it many times. Shall is a requirement. So looking at whether the management review fell within the plan interval, I got to make sure that all these shalls are incorporated into the management review. So the first shall should be recorded. Therefore, a record needs to be produced and shall include information to as follows. A, internal and external issues that are relevant to the laboratory. So this is a good opportunity. Internal, bring things to the forefront, things that's going to affect the operation of the laboratory. Some examples could be retirement, aging equipment, or perhaps company policies. External, the way I like to present this is, hey, we don't live in a bubble. There's things that are outside the confines of your organization that perhaps will impact it. During COVID, saw that always captured in here. Oh, it impacted everyone, as far as the operation of the organization and the laboratory. Other things could include such things as regulatory requirements, competition, accreditation requirements, new technology. These are all things that can be looked at and see whether or not these things are going to affect the lab or the relevance of these to the laboratory. One thing I mentioned a management review, a good management review would actually produce some good opportunities for improvement. So that's why I'm beginning here. I said hopefully the management review is a requirement. Ideally, your organization will be getting some benefit, from actually fulfilling this requirement, other than checking that block off of the standard that you conducted one, and some opportunities for improvement could be produced. So looking at the requirement here, 892B, input shall include the fulfillment of objectives. So earlier in the standard, we have this clause here, where the lab shall document and maintain policies and objectives for the fulfillment of the purposes of this document, and shall ensure that the objectives are acknowledged and implemented at all levels of the organization. Good time to go back, review that. How did you do? Ideally it's more than words on paper. Good opportunity during the management review to review this. 893, the suitability of policies and procedure. So your quality management system, that's a living document, the way I like to refer to it. It's not something that's written, put up on the shelf and collects dust and next assessment is pulled out. This should be reflective of what your organization is actually doing, how you're complying with the standards. So you want to make sure that it's reflective of what the lab is actually doing. If it's not, of course, these documents can be revised to reflect that. External documents, have they been revised? These are documents that you bring from the outside world that you may have adopted. Things like USP, ISO, ASTM, they're procedural documents. They are subjected to change. So of course, you want to assure the management review could be a good time to go back and assure those documents haven't been revised. We're going to turn back the clock here on D. We're going to look at the status of actions from previous management review. Ideally, you have some action items that came out of that review. So you go back and revisit those from the previous management review. Were they assigned and accomplished? Anything still pending or outstanding? Input item E, outcome of recent internal audits. As I mentioned, ideally the internal audit would have been conducted ideally just prior to the management review. Internal audits, you're looking for compliance to the standard, to your own quality management system. So during this session, of course, or excuse me, this input, were they done? What were the results? Is the process effective? Are you doing an internal audit and the assessment body's coming in? You're having a clean slate. The assessment body is coming in, and you're having findings from the external source. Ideally, your internal audit, ideally would catch these before and take appropriate corrective action before the external audit comes around. So, ideally, it's more than, hey, you did the internal audit. What was the results? Were they effective? Hey, was corrective action, was there any items that required correction or corrective action? Yeah, and which brings us right to F, corrective action. So this is a good time to go back, look at the corrective actions during that's been implemented since the last management review. You know, ideally, this would be more than simply referencing that you didn't have any, or a simple statement referencing what numbers. You know, ideally, what corrective action had been implemented. Are there any open corrective action? Has corrective action been monitored, and has it been determined to be effective? Are there any repeat corrective actions? Another thing, you know, are the staff aware of the process? Are there any things falling between the cracks? So with, I want to just review that other one, one of the previous ones here. Has it been monitored and been determined to be effective? That is one of the steps in the corrective action process. So normally you want to let some time go by. Management review would be a good time perhaps to revisit the corrective actions, evaluate them, and then make that determination whether or not the corrective action has been effective. You know, has there been any repeats? Let some time pass, and perhaps the management review would be a good time to officially close any open corrective actions. Assessments by external bodies. So input. So this would be this could be, of course, this will be your accrediting body. Perhaps you have customers auditing you or assessing your organization, or perhaps you come under regulatory requirements that would come in and assess or audit your organization. So, you know, of course, you want to look at, you know, by who, you know, when was it performed, when is the next one scheduled, what was the results of these, any finding, concerns, or recommendations. Yeah, and if you're having issues with a lot of findings during your external audits, yeah, it might be a good time to maybe revisit the internal audit. And, you know, ideally, yep, I actually enjoy when I look at an internal audit and an organization has findings on themselves. Goodness, it makes my job easier. So ideally, you know, might be a good time to, if you are having findings from external audits, why are these things occurring when you're auditing yourself? Input item H, changes in the volume and type of work or the range of laboratory activities. So, or any trends detected, you may need to shift your resources, financial and human, or perhaps cross-training. Work is picking up in one area, decreasing in another area. Might be a chance here to evaluate any trends and perhaps shift resources or even do some cross-training. Customer and personnel feedback. So personnel, that was added when the standard was revised in 2017. So what is your staff telling you? Earlier in the standard, there is a requirement here under feedback. So it's required that you actively seek feedback from your customers. So it's a good time to go back and review that feedback. Are there any trends? Are you receiving your feedback? Seeing a lot of folks sort of switching gears here. You go back and you look at your customer feedback. Folks doing surveys. You sent out 100 surveys, you only get 2 back. Well, you're seeking it, but it's not being very effective. So it might also be a good opportunity to see if your efforts are being rewarded and you're actually receiving feedback. And, you know, ideally the feedback can be analyzed and what's stated there to improve the management system, laboratory activities, and of course, customer service. Complaints, you know, beyond, you know, if you received any, are there any trends? If there was a complaint, was corrective action taken? And the results of that corrective action. Are they processed accordingly? Section 7.9 is the complaint process. Excuse me, not the complaint process, the complaint section in the standard for the requirements here. So you have to have a documented process in place that has to incorporate various elements. You want to make sure if you have complaints that the process was followed, customer was kept in the loop. Go back and revisit that. You have to keep the customer in the loop and keep them aware of the results of the investigation. I added this on here too. Are they being directed to the proper personnel? Creating awareness of your staff. You could be having complaints come in. You want to make sure that the process is followed and they're directed to the proper resources, personnel to address them according to the process that you have established. 892K, effectiveness of any implemented improvement. Again, this is a good opportunity to go back and look at a requirement that was in the standard previously, prior to the management review section, where under 862, the laboratory shall identify and select opportunities for improvement and implement any necessary action. This could also include any preventive action. 2005, we had corrective and preventive action. Still seeing preventive action as a vehicle being utilized by organization. Adequacy of resources. Are there enough equipment, human resources, facility? One thing with the previous management review, if there was an issue here, you needed to update equipment, and it's still a trend here for the following management review. You want to don't want these issues to be repeating themselves. You want to, like I said, ideally action items be taken and get the ball rolling on some things and hopefully implement it prior to the next management review. And if not, they be able to go back and verify and discuss why not. Here, in addition, when the standard was revised, risk identification. That was new when the standard was revised. So section 8.5 is the section on risk and opportunity. So you can see here the shall. We have a section 8.5 in regards to risk and opportunities. And you see the very first clause under section 8.5. So you want to go back and look at what you've done to comply with this section. What risk has been identified? Was the risk taken? Was it mitigated or avoided? What was the outcome? So 17025 in 2017 is strongly emphasizes risk-based thinking. The word risk appears over 30 times. The very first time it appears is under impartiality 414, and it basically says it needs to be ongoing, risk to impartiality. So what's ongoing? If you're a small organization and there's not a whole lot of coming and going, as an assessor, because that shall there under 414, I like to see that the risk to impartiality has been initially evaluated and then reevaluated. Ongoing, like I said, size of the organization, if things are pretty stable, perhaps once a year during the management review is sufficient. If there's a lot of changes, personnel, customers within larger organizations, then perhaps more than just the annual management review would be needed. And outcome of the assurance of the validity of results. So what are we referring to here? Well, one thing is proficiency testing. Under the accreditation body, you're required to do proficiency testing. Speaking on behalf of PJLA, you're required to do them every year. So assessor, when you have your assessment, will be looking to do the proficiency testing, or excuse me, looking for the results of the proficiency test. So the management review, hey, have they been done? If they haven't been done, they certainly would need to get perhaps scheduled. If they have been done, what was the results? Hey, you know, ideally, your proficiency testing results were favorable, and there were no perhaps failures in your PT results. If there were failures, then of course corrective action would need to be taken and it would need to be investigated. Other things under here would be any perhaps intermediate checks you have on equipment, control charts. Are there any trends being detected, or anything seems to be drifting? If you have equipment that's you have had calibrated and it seemed like it was sort of drifting out of tolerance, maybe a good time to go back and look at any sort of intermediate checks you have on that equipment, and perhaps shorten a calibration interval, for example, if it was sort of detecting a potential drift would be one example of other things that could be included under this input item in here. And now an all catch-all, other relevant factors such as monitoring activities and training. So 892, of course, is input. Now, if you look at the requirements for 893, there's a section for outputs, and you see shall record all decisions and actions related to at least. So looking at a management review, we're looking, as per the shall there, shall record on your management review record that these output items were taken into account, and you know, ideally force the hand a little bit here and ask yourself various questions in regards to these required outputs. Is the management system effective, and is the processes effective? Or improvement of the laboratory activities related to the fulfillment of the requirements of this document. Provision of required resources, are they being supplied? And then after you've done this management review, you looked at all these required inputs, maybe you added some things. Basically, are there any need for change? So the standard specifies these actions need to be recorded. These items need to be kept in mind and decision regarding them recorded. Okay, this will conclude today's webinar for October. So bear with me. Again, you should have a section in there for questions. So if you have any questions in regard to the topic at hand, please feel free to type them in. Currently, I don't see any. So I'll give it a moment here, see if it populates itself. I hope this was informative. You know, ideally, yes, the management review states that the standard states you need to do them. So I certainly hope that this provided you some guidance in conducting not just fulfilling a requirement, but a good beneficial management review. All right, I'm not seeing, hang on. I appreciate the kind feedback there that you folks enjoyed the session. Who should chair the management review meeting? You know, that's an individual, says the top management shall be involved. I would say the individual perhaps that oversees the laboratory on a day-to-day basis. That's my opinion. That's not a requirement. Do you have any recommendations for smaller organizations to meet these requirements? Well, I'd recommend, you know, ideally you do it at least once a year. Nothing on top of larger requirements. If it's a smaller organization, perhaps it's one of these opportunities where you can include the entire staff. can tell you, I've seen some folks really take the management review meeting to heart. The entire staff does attend. They make an event of it. Yeah, I mean, bring in lunch for the folks, and folks really feel that they are participating and has some perhaps ownership of the organization and contributing to the overall effectiveness if they're able to participate in the management review. And if they're, you can utilize the more points of view that are included, perhaps could be more beneficial. But yeah, like I said, basically, as an assessor, always, when I get to this part, a plan interval, want to make sure you do it according to the plan interval. All the required inputs and outputs recorded. So we want to make sure all your management reviews are, you have all those required inputs and outputs. You have a record of them. And then, ideally, I like to see some action items, some good thought processes. I just, if it's not all encompassing, I put together some general things you could consider when you're looking at all those required inputs and outputs that I may want to go back and revisit it. So that appears to be all the questions I have. Some very good questions here. Appreciate everybody attending. But before we go, just would like to turn the clock ahead to, believe it or not, November. So yeah, I was just thinking about the presentation. Maybe I should have done this one in October and the management review in November, because November we're doing, I got scheduled the requirements for the internal audit. If you recall, we recommended doing the internal audit prior to the management review. So a little pun on there. So again, thank you everybody for attending. Again, the recorded version of this webinar will be available on our website, or you're welcome to the slides if perhaps you want to utilize the slides and perhaps present that to your staff yourself. By all means, feel free to do so. Thank you, and I look forward to doing it again next month.